So, because I noticed in one of the FPMT newsletters, they asked the people who came to Kopan really early to tell our story of how we came to Kopan. Okay. So, of course, I love to talk about myself. And you all know my story already, but Rinpoche drilled in the 8 worldly concerns. I'm drilling in my story. Okay, so when I traveled, after school, I worked for a year, and then I traveled, and went to India and to Nepal, and we went trekking in the Himalayas. The furthest stop we got in our trekking, in our whole 1.5 year trip, happened to be Tame was Rinpoche was born, but I didn't know about Rinpoche at that time. There was some other teacher there that we've talked to. Came back to Kopan. I was very fascinated by all the prints of Tibetan deities and so on. I thought they were really cool. Even the wrathful ones, I like them. So we got some of those, just the on rice paper, the cheap ones, because we didn't have much money, and took those back. And then I also read a copy of the book. I think it was the one His Holiness's brother wrote. Was it titled My Land and My People? Something like that. Okay, so I read that. So I knew something about Tibet. Okay, so came back to the States, got a job, went back to graduate school, and then summer vacation, I went to the Bodhi Tree bookstore. If you lived in California, in Los Angeles, this was the go-to, new age bookstore. And so I saw a flyer in it about, there's 2 lamas coming, and they're doing a retreat, for a 3-week retreat at Lake Arrowhead. You could come for 2 weeks if you want to. And there's this nun named Thubten Chodron, and she's going to give a talk like a week before the retreat about, her experience at the monastery and living in Nepal and India. Okay, so that sounded good. I didn't have anything else to do that summer. I wasn't working. So I went to the talk, first of all, and just heard what she had to say. And it was quite interesting because I knew something about Tibet, not about Buddhism. Didn't know anything about Buddhism. And she said that the lamas were coming into town, and some other students of theirs were coming, and they needed places to stay. So I told her, if anybody's coming into town, they can stay at my apartment. And so this woman named Vicky, who was one of the lama's older students, she was coming in. So she came to stay with us. And then the lamas were flying into LAX. And Vicky wanted to go to greet them. So I said, okay, I'll take you. So just a little detour into how I looked. I had long hair down to here, just gotten my ears pierced. I was wearing my embroidered peasant blouse and my very colorful, long Indian skirt. Okay. And so I had just gotten done with rehearsal for a semi-professional Israeli dancing group. So I picked up Vicky. We went to LAX and we greeted the lamas. So Lama and Rinpoche both came in, and somehow I wound up talking to Rinpoche. And, what do you talk to a Lama about? Well, where are you coming from? And he said, Hawaii. And I said, what were you doing there? Oh, we gave some talks, but we also went to, I don't know, SeaWorld or some kind of place, and he said, and we saw these big whales, dolphins, these big fish. Yeah. And then we started talking about dolphins. Okay, so my first conversation with my root teacher was about dolphins. Yeah. So, they always say that the Buddhas lead, and teach people according to their level. So I was at the level of dolphins, and he met me at my level, and then I went to the retreat, and wow, he started teaching the Dharma. And, one of the first things they said was, you don't have to believe anything we say. I said, great, I'll listen. And, and they said, if the practice helps you, do it. If it doesn't help you, leave it. I said, that sounds reasonable. So I had signed up for 2 weeks. I wound up staying all 3 weeks. And what really struck me was the fact that they were willing to talk about things that nobody else would talk about, like death, like suffering. These were not taboo subjects. We could talk about them, and it wasn't talking about them in a way that made you depressed. It was talking about them in a way that helped you clarify your own life and your priorities and what was important to you and what kind of person you wanted to be, and that was like so good for my mind to get really clear, especially about ethical values, because they emphasize that during the course. And then, so precious human life, ethical values, death and impermanence, bodhicitta, yeah, and loving kindness, they taught that. And, yeah, and rebirth. They explained rebirth, yeah, not just, oh, well, it happens and you got to believe it, but here's the logic. And they gave, especially Rinpoche, he gave the whole, the whole detailed logic to prove that rebirth exists. And then he taught a meditation about getting some kind of feeling about the continuity of mind. And this was so important for me because up until that point in my life, I was always saying, why am I alive? What's the purpose of my life? I don't want to die without having some meaning and purpose in my life. And here, talking about rebirth, talking about the importance of ethical conduct, talking about the importance of kindness and compassion, I was like, boing, oh, there's some meaning to my life because it's not just a one go. I'm going to have a future life. And the ultimate meaning of my life, awakening. It's not just duplicating my parents' life. It's not just making myself comfortable. It's not just, having a good reputation and people liking me. There's some long-term ultimate meaning for my life. And that was just like, whoa, okay. So after the 3-week course, a few students were doing a 1-week retreat at somebody's house. So I signed up for that, and doing that meditation, I was like, became so clear, if I don't learn more about this, I'm going to regret it when I die. And I've always, even before meeting Buddhism, had the feeling of I don't want to regret anything when I die. So the rest of that summer, I came home, I did a meditation, I did the meditation practice, and I read what there was to read, which was Losang Rampa, which was not, I would not do that as recommended reading for newcomers, but it was all we had in those days, him and Lama Govinda, and Alexander David Neal. So anyway, so I meditated what they had taught. There were outlines in the Wish-Fulfilling Golden Sun, that mimeographed book, that we had, and I followed the meditation outlines, and I did Lamrim meditation every day. And the Lamrim meditation, it just was so helpful to me, so helpful, not only spiritually, but psychologically, for addressing, my unhappiness, my problems, my dissatisfaction. Yeah. So in the retreat, I thought, okay, I don't want to die with regret. I'm going to quit my job and go to Kopan, because I knew about the Kopan course. So I was married, when I had come back from no children, when I had come back from the 3-week course, the lamas were going to Indiana to teach another course. So I said to Bob, my husband, I said, this is really good stuff, go. So while I was doing the 1-week retreat, he went back to Indiana and did the course, and he came back. And so he was a Buddhist too. But he didn't have the aspiration for ordination that I did, okay? And so we had some things to work out in our marriage, but we worked them out quite well, I think. Anyway, I said, I'm going to Kopan. You're welcome to come. It would be nice if you came. He knew that, he knew me well. And so he decided to come too. He would have rather stayed, because he had gotten a job. He was a new lawyer with legal services and, working for the legal services for the people who were impoverished. And he would have liked, I think, to continue that, but he came to Kopan. And so we were there. It became very clear that I went and I requested ordination, and my hair that was here became here, and we wind up staying between India and Nepal for about a year, I think. Of course, we were living separately completely this whole time. We both did the Vajrasattva retreat that summer, which Venerable Sangye Kadra was the Sangha person who was leading us, along with one monk. She's pretending that she's not hearing. She did a very good job at that, but both of us were there. We both did the 3 months, came back, and then, Lama, of course, wanted us to go back, especially if I had requested ordination, you have to go back and do things. So we went back to the States, and I didn't stay a year. That was the usual thing to do, but Bob was very kind, and he said he would give me $20 a month. Which in those days was more than it is today. So so I went back. How long did we stay? Some months. Some months. And we met Geshe Gyaltsen at that time. He was the teacher. The TDL hadn't really started then, but he was the one who started TDL. And so received some teachings from him, and then went back. Then went back. I went back. Bob stayed. He kept on working. He was in the States, I went back to Kopan, in Nepal. And I just hung out by the Sangha as much as I possibly could, until it was time to ordain. And what happened? Yeah, I have to write down the sequence of these things because I can't remember it all. But anyway, we got kicked out of Nepal because the Nepali government said, your visas are up. And so almost all of the Western Sangha had to go across. This was actually before I went back to America. We had to go from Nepal to Dharamsala in the pre-monsoon time, which is outrageously hot. And at that time, I had hepatitis. And the Sangha, I tagged along with the Sangha, and they kind of took care of me until we got there. And then I started going to classes at the library and went back to Kopan for the November course. And then after that, went back to the States. And with my parents flipping out, and stayed some months there, and then went back to Dharamsala. And at that time, the lamas had arranged for an ordination. So there were some people who took Gelang Bhikshu ordination, and then a couple of monks that took novice ordination. And then there was me and Susanna Parodi that we took Getsulma, Shramaneri ordination. And then just went back to Kopan, and then stayed in Dharamsala, and the rest is, that's what happened. Kopan in those days was really very, very poor. They didn't have much money. For dinner, for medicine meal, the boys, meaning all the little monks, they got one roti and some tea. The Westerners, we were privileged. We got one roti with one spoon of peanut butter plus tea. And we were living in the the building called Norbalinka, which was named after His Holiness's summer palace in Tibet. It was hardly a palace. This was the room where I had hepatitis, where you swept your floor and your neighbor downstairs got the dirt. And the toilets were just dug in the earth with planks over them. There was one squat toilet, and its name was Samsara. And but you only went in there as infrequently as you could, and chose to use the ones that were the ditches, because Samsara stunk really bad. Okay. Just as Lama said, Lama Zopa said, Samsara, you want to renounce it? Well, yeah, we did. But the feeling there, and by the way, we had to pay, and they were counting on us to give donations, because our donations supported they had the school for all the young monks, and they were counting on donations from Westerners to support the school and the young monks. And also we were eating food and so on, and to support ourselves there. And similarly, when we went to Tushita in Dharamsala, we had to pay. When we later went out to different Dharma centers, sometimes if we worked a certain number of hours, we got room and board, but all of our other expenses we had to pay for, and travel we had to pay for. And then when we finally got around to in 1882 we started Dorji Palmo Monastery, then we had to pay for room and board to the Institute because we were living at the Institute. So there were financial difficulties, and yeah, we had financial difficulties, visa problems. Everybody got sick. It was either hepatitis or dysentery. But we were so happy to be there. Just the joy. I mean, I remember those days, and yes, I didn't get along with so-and-so, and I was jealous of the other one or whatever, but I was so happy, just being near my teachers, being in a monastic environment, receiving a lot of teachings. I attended everything. I took copious notes. I reviewed my notes. I meditated on the notes. It was fantastic. And nothing was very well organized. So whenever they needed, we were doing some puja, they needed the phonetics for the puja. We started learning Tibetan, from the boys. So you had, a 12, 16-year-old maybe, teaching us ka, 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 yeah. Well, it's the same. How are those different levels? Well, you don't understand it. It's ka, ka, ra, no. And then I'd go, ka, ka, ra, and they say, no, that's not right. But anyway, so they were trying to teach us Tibetan, and we taught them English. Yeah, none of us knew how to teach English, but we were supposed to teach it. We didn't have any equipment. I think we had one blackboard, and that was it at Kopan. Anyway, just so happy. When they needed phonetics or they needed something done, we would get some message. We would stay up, and write out the phonetics until 11 o'clock at night, wake up at, 4 o'clock in the morning or 4:30, 5 if you slept late. But, and the rooms weren't heated. We were freezing, when it got cold. We were sweating in the summer. But we were so happy, The food was very simple. But yeah, it was really quite a magical time, I think. At least that's my memories. I mean, we had all the usual problems people have, but somehow just the atmosphere and really everyday practicing, yeah. And we chanted the Georgia Puja, because I was hanging out with the nuns before I ordained, and then, of course, after I ordained. The Georgia Puja is similar to Lama Chopa, but I think it might be a little bit longer. Anyway, we chanted that every morning in Tibetan. Yeah, using the phonetics. Didn't really understand much about it, but we were chanting it. And then Nick, one of the older monks, gave us some instruction. He had his notes from when Rinpoche taught it, so he went through those, and we learned, okay, this section's 7-limb prayer, this section is Lamrim prayer, this section is requesting, this section is visualization. So, but we're chanting it all in Tibet because there wasn't, I think at some point we must have gotten some translation. But so much of what we were doing, there was no translation into English, and we just knew kind of roughly what it was, and yes, we need to do the 7-limb purification, creation of merit, before you do the Lama, your Lamrim meditation, yeah. They really emphasized that. So yeah, so we did it. We went along with everything. It was quite wonderful. And then we started getting sent out. And that was the test. Yeah. Okay. So as usual, I talk longer than my fair share of time, but yeah.